The red stapler on my desk slammed shut like a gunshot the moment Karen thrust the termination notice into my hands. 1 week before your pension, she said, eyes cold as steel. I stared at the paper, felt the weight of 27 years pressed down, and whispered, "Fine, let's see how far your policies really go." I'd spent nearly 3 decades at Apex Freight, the kind of logistics firm where the warehouse lights never quite turned off, and the coffee in the break room tasted like burnt ambition. My first day back in 1999, I walked in with a fresh badge that read Operations Coordinator. A nervous grin and a promise that a solid career would eventually hand me a gold-leafed pension check. The rhythm of the dock became my heartbeat. The low rumble of forklifts, the clatter of pallets, the occasional chuckle of a coworker sharing a joke about the great retirement plan. My wife, Mara, would tease me, "When you finally cash that pension, you'll finally be able to afford a proper vacation." I'd laugh, picturing a quiet beach, not the endless rows of shipping containers that had become my second home. Over the years, I logged perfect safety records, earned every commendation, and never missed a deadline. The employee file on the HR server was a clean slate. No warnings, no infractions. I thought I'd earned the right to walk out on my own terms, collect my pension, and finally stop worrying about the next shift. That illusion shattered on a gray March morning. The fluorescent lights flickered above my desk as I finished the monthly inventory reconciliation. The soft hum of the HVAC was punctuated by the click of high heels on the polished linoleum. Karen, the senior manager who'd always praised my punctuality, appeared at the end of the aisle, her expression unreadable. "Tom," she said, sliding a thick envelope across the desk, "the board has decided to eliminate your position, effective next Monday." My hand froze around the red stapler I'd used to bind the last 3 reports. 1 week before my pension, I muttered, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. She didn't smile. "You'll receive your accrued vacation, a severance package, and the standard exit paperwork. This is final." I left the office with the envelope tucked under my arm, feeling the sting of a sudden cold wind. The hallway seemed longer, the fluorescent tubes dimmer. My mind raced. I could quit, protest, or simply accept the betrayal. But then I remembered a line from the employee handbook, a clause buried under pages of benefits and safety guidelines. It was titled Malicious Compliance, and read, in plain language, that any employee who followed company policy to the letter could request a formal review if the outcome caused operational disruption. The paragraph was a footnote, but it was there, a silent weapon waiting for a moment like this. I slipped back to my desk, placed the stapler on the edge of the keyboard, and opened the handbook to the exact page. The clause was under Section 12, Employee Conduct Policy 12.5.2, Mandatory Compliance Actions. My heart beat faster. If I could trigger a chain reaction that forced Apex to confront its own rules, maybe the company would finally feel the weight of the promises it had broken. I drafted a formal request for the overdue quarterly safety inspection that the safety officer, Luis, had been postponing for months. I printed the request on company letterhead, attached the relevant policy excerpt, and, for emphasis, stapled the document with the same red stapler that had sealed my termination. The subject line read, "Immediate action required, safety inspection, policy 4.2.1. I sent it to the compliance inbox, hit send, and leaned back, feeling a strange calm settle over me. The next morning, the compliance team replied within an hour. "Your request is under review. We will schedule an inspection within 48 hours. I smiled, knowing the clock was already ticking. 2 days later, a team of inspectors entered the loading bay, clipboards in hand, eyes sharp. The lead inspector, Carla, was a no-nonsense woman with a clipboard that seemed to have more pages than the company's policy manual. As they walked the aisles, they discovered 3 unreported hydraulic leaks in the dock's main conveyor system. violations that directly contradicted OSHA Standard 1910-220, and Apex's own Policy 7.3.4, immediate shutdown on critical safety violations. Carla wrote a citation, placed a bright red sticker on each leak, and announced, "We must halt operations until these issues are fully resolved." The plant manager, Greg, burst into the break room, his face pale. "We can't shut down. The client shipment is due tomorrow. This will cost us millions." He paced, gesturing at the stapler on his desk. "Tom, you're the one who filed this. Can we delay the shutdown?" I lifted the stapler, feeling the cold metal against my palm, and said, "Policy 7.3.4 states that any citation of this nature must be addressed before further processing. The system will lock the production line until the issue is cleared." I placed the stapler on the conference table, and the warehouse management software immediately displayed a red alert. Production halted. Safety violation unresolved. The sound of idle forklifts screeching to a stop filled the room. The shutdown sent ripples through the entire operation. Trucks already on the dock were forced to wait. Drivers grew restless, and the client's supply chain manager called, voice trembling. "We need those parts today, Tom. This is unacceptable." I could hear the desperation in his tone, but I held firm. "The policy is clear. We cannot jeopardize employee safety for a shipment." While the warehouse floor buzzed with confusion, I turned my attention to the IT department. The employee handbook required that any departing employee's system access be revoked within 24 hours and that a data retention audit be performed before final log-off. I drafted an email to Priya, the IT director, attaching Policy 12.5.2. Verbatim, all departing personnel must have their network credentials deactivated no later than 24 hours after termination. A full data backup of all active projects must be completed prior to deactivation. I wrote, "Please initiate the audit immediately and lock all external API connections until the process finishes." Priya replied, "Understood, initiating backup now." Within minutes, terabytes of files, financial projections, merger documents, supplier contracts began streaming to the secure server farm. The network load spiked, causing a temporary outage across the corporate intranet. The backup progress bar filled slowly, each percentage point a reminder that the company's own data was now a hostage. The outage caught the attention of the CFO, Mike, who was mid-conference call with potential investors for the upcoming merger with a rival logistics firm. "What's happening on your end?" he shouted into the speakerphone, his voice strained. I heard the faint crackle of the line. "We're complying with Policy 12.5.2. The backup will take approximately 12 hours, during which all external communications are blocked." Mike's jaw tightened, and the call cut to static. The investors, hearing only silence, asked, "Is this a technical issue?" The answer was no. It was a deliberate, rule-based shutdown that the company could not ignore. By Friday, the boardroom was a battlefield of panic. The merger was slated for next Thursday, and the delays threatened to void the entire deal. The CEO, David, a man who'd once praised my reliability during a 10-year anniversary ceremony, paced before a massive window overlooking the dock. His reflection stared back, a ghostly silhouette of a leader whose empire was crumbling. He summoned me to his office, the same mahogany-paneled room where I'd once celebrated promotions. "Tom, what the hell have you done?" he demanded, voice low but edged with fury. I placed the red stapler on his desk, the same one that had sealed my termination notice. "I'm following the policies you wrote, David," I replied calmly. "The safety inspection, the data audit, the production lock, each required by the handbook." He stared at the stapler as if it were a weapon. "You've cost us millions," he snarled, gesturing to a projection of projected losses, fines, delayed shipments, a plummeting stock price. "You could have walked away. Why sabotage us?" I met his gaze. "You decided to cut me loose a week before I earned my pension. I chose to hold you to the contract you signed with me. If you ignore the rules, the system forces you to pay. He opened the envelope on his desk, my formal request for a formal review of policy compliance, and began reading aloud. The language was precise. Pursuant to Section 12.5.2 and Policy 4.21, the employee has initiated a mandatory safety inspection and data retention audit. The resulting operational disruptions are direct consequences of non-compliance with established corporate procedures. He glanced at the clock. We have until end of day to resolve this, or the SEC will be notified. The boardroom door swung open and the legal counsel entered, a folder of evidence tucked under his arm. He laid out 3 documents on the polished table: the safety citation, the backup log showing a massive data transfer, and a copy of the termination notice. He pointed to a highlighted clause in the employee handbook. Termination of an employee within 30 days of scheduled pension eligibility shall trigger a mandatory review of severance compliance. The board members exchanged uneasy looks. The CFO's chair was empty. Mike had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. The compliance officer, Carla, stood with a hard hat and a clipboard, her earlier citation now the centerpiece of a looming legal battle. Within the next 48 hours, the SEC opened a preliminary investigation into Apex's handling of safety violations and financial disclosures. The safety citation forced the company to halt all loading operations for 3 days while the hydraulic leaks were repaired, a delay that cost $8 million in missed contracts. The data backup exposed a series of unauthorized financial transfers between Apex and a shell company linked to the CFO, adding in $12 million in potential fraud charges. The merger, once valued at $250 million, collapsed as investors withdrew, fearing regulatory fallout. The final blow came when the auditor's report, compiled from the backup files, revealed that Apex had consistently underreported safety incidents to keep insurance premiums low. The board, now under intense scrutiny, decided to settle with the SEC for $45 million to avoid a protracted lawsuit. The CEO, David, resigned in a terse statement. I accept responsibility for the failures that occurred under my leadership. The fallout was swift. The CFO, Mike, was arrested on embezzlement charges. The board members stepped down and the company's stock plunged 68% in a single week. Employees were offered voluntary severance packages, and the warehouse was shuttered for a month while new safety protocols were installed. Through it all, I sat in my modest apartment, a single window overlooking the city's skyline. The red stapler rested on my kitchen counter, now a relic of the battle I'd waged. Exactly 1 week after my termination, the pension check arrived in the mail. $42,350, as in crisp paper form. It felt heavier than any paycheck I'd ever earned, not because of its monetary value, but because it represented a victory over a system that had tried to discard me. I placed the check in a plain envelope, slid the stapler into the flap, and mailed it to David's former office with a short note. Thank you for the lesson. Rules are only as strong as the people who enforce them. As the post office clerk sealed the envelope, I imagined the stapler's tiny metal jaws closing, sealing the final chapter of Apex's downfall. The story spread through industry forums and social media. Colleagues from other warehouses shared my experience, calling it the most precise act of retaliation they'd ever seen. Some called it revenge. I called it accountability. The handbook clause that had once seemed like a footnote became a headline in trade publications. Employee uses malicious compliance to uncover $45 million corporate fraud. I never set out to ruin a company. I only wanted the dignity I'd earned over 27 years. By following the policies to the letter, I forced the corporation to confront its own hypocrisy. The red stapler, an ordinary office supply, turned into the catalyst that exposed a house of cards built on shortcuts, lies, and broken promises. In the end, the cost of their betrayal was measured not just in dollars, but in the collapse of a culture that thought it could discard anyone at will. If you ever feel a system is treating you unfairly, remember that sometimes the most powerful weapon is simply doing exactly what you're supposed to do, no matter how small the tool. Drop a comment below with what you'd do if you were in my shoes. If this story resonated, smash the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss another tale where the little things change everything.